We have two anonymous questions that came in. This question could be a topic of its own as well. But if you could provide resources or guidance on so I'll place the question first. There are so many of us who are illiterate in the rights of marriage in Islam, and I'm wondering if the Ustada can shed some light on the rights of wives and husbands in Islam. In this day and age, many struggle with men who are self-absorbed and can be mean even to the children, or it would be nice to know when our rights are violated and if we are inadvertently violating theirs as well, and when divorce would be reasonable.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's a very important question, but there's entire courses that go over the rights of, marriage for the husband and wife, and very specific details about what is expected of each. So we don't have enough time to go through that, but there are things that are recorded. There's many classes and lectures. There's texts that you can read. I don't have like a list of sources online, available right now off the top of my head, but I'm sure we can maybe create something and then send that out or post it on the link to this talk once I get a chance. Maybe we can also ask some of the other teachers who I think may have even classes on these topics, right? That they may have done the fiqh of marriage, for example. So I think though it's part of our job in our community is to provide those resources, yes, but also to incentivize young couples way before, or even singles before they're married, to go in and take these classes and to really be well versed in the rights of marriage and to know what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, and what is expected of you, right? First, because we're good at sometimes about knowing what we're owed, but we don't really do enough work on knowing what we are going to have to deliver. So taking the time to learn all of that. But let's see if I can maybe create some resource list afterwards offline, inshallah.
Sada Hosai, along that same note, I feel a couple of individuals asked for your slides. If we could kind of take those or the links where you've gotten the resources from, right? And then we can kind of collate that and share that as well. That would be very helpful to some of the audience, I believe.
Sure. Yeah, no, I can, the ISPU, I can provide actually here. I'll give you the links to some of these right here in the chat. If you can share them with the live chat. I'll put them in the private
chat. And I also believe there's another message in there in the private chat from someone. So if you could take a look.
Sure. Let me look, inshallah.
While that is happening, another question essentially is, I want to take this question a step further. How do you deal with a person who is always right and never wrong in any case, gives silent treatment, and when you try to reconcile by talking first, all the blame is on you and they take no accountability? Pause. In scenarios where you want to help resurrect the marriage or improve the marriage, right, and the other party is not open to it, what do you do in those scenarios, and how do you approach a scenario where you do want to pick something? Because you talked about there's a lot to consider, right? But if it's only considered by one party, it's not going to work, right? So how do you make it so both parties are considering this?
Right. It's difficult. I've absolutely run into situations where one spouse is very eager on getting help and seeking help, and then they're being stonewalled and being completely sidelined, and the doors being closed on them and even threatened. I've had people tell me that their spouses threatened them to divorce if they actually try to seek help. So that's complete abuse, and it's unacceptable. And I think there's a few ways around this, but before people get married, there should be, just as we create, this is my advice, but I think we're seeing so many cases now of this type of behavior that we almost have to preempt it in the nikah process. So before you draw out your nikah, there should be, I think, some addition there that would allow for protocol, like what are we going to do in the event of problems in our marriage, and what does the process look like? What is a healthy process? Does it involve family? Does it involve a specific teacher? Is there a resource that we both agree on that we are allowed to invite into the marriage in order to facilitate? But all of that, I think, has to be predetermined for the younger couples. Now, if you're already in a marriage and you're dealing with this type of behavior, depending on who you are, if you're the female, I would say absolutely. This is when, if you feel like your spouse is being unreasonable and they're not willing to get any help, and you are, seeing your marriage basically fall apart, they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of safeguarding the marriage, especially if they refuse to work on themselves, or if they're putting all the expectation on you and they are completely just refusing. This is when you have the right to invite your wali, the person that you see as an authority over you, that is supposed to manage these types of things. That could be your father, it could be your uncle, it could be someone in your community. For the converts, sometimes they ask the imams of their community or a sheikh to serve as their wali. You are in your right, absolutely, to enlist the help of a person of authority to basically speak to your husband and to get him straightened out, because it's not right to just keep telling women in these situations like, oh, be patient, be patient, be patient. For how long? When you're dealing with a husband who is refusing help, but the toxic behavior, the abusive behavior, the negligent behavior continues. This is outrageous, to keep expecting the wife to just hold her tongue and take it. This is not right. She has to be empowered. So I think allowing or identifying who that is very important. Having that person clear for you, like, I'm going to invite and it could, if you want to keep your parents out of it, maybe you have an older sibling who could play that role, especially if they're upright, God-fearing people who know the Sharia well, who can easily put your husband in his place. In that way that men know how to do. Men speak with men in a way that women don't speak to men. So maybe that's what you need to do. But I would say absolutely don't feel like you just have to take it, because that has led to so much pain, and it has horrible effects, especially when children are in the home, of just daily tension and cycles of abuse that just kind of grow from there. So we need to interrupt those cycles and empower those who are victims to know how to get out of them.
There's two questions that are kind of similarly related. You started your presentation off in terms of like talaq and then khula, right? So could you go a little bit more into the nuances between men asking and requesting for divorce versus when is it permissible for a woman to request divorce? So a little bit, if you could, because there's some conversations in the chat about like, why can't a woman initiate divorce?
Yeah, and this is what I was saying in the beginning, like, the fiqh of these things is specific, but essentially men are given the ability to enact the divorce, because generally speaking, men are, able to, or they're supposed to anyway, have the ability to really not get into an emotional state about that decision. It's a very weighty decision, and there's a lot at stake. And so for a man who has the, who's able to kind of be present in that rational state, he will not fall into an emotional state, at least that's what we hope, and just throw out the word divorce carelessly, because it's such a severe thing to do. Whereas women, as we know, and if we're being honest with ourselves, we do tend to fall into highly emotional states. I know many sisters who just because they're so fed up, they will use these references as a means of just, they're so exasperated, they're done, they're just feeling like they're at their last straw, and they don't have any more to give, so they'll just be like, I want out. And so they kind of can fall into, I think, these very heightened emotional states, and for that reason the woman is not given the authority to divorce with the words, like with the actual pronouncement of talaq. However, if she wants to divorce, she has the recourse of khula, which is basically ensuring that she is really also consciously making this decision. It's not a reactive state. It's a state of weighing everything. And she goes through the proper channels, the authority, which would likely be in her community, the masjid or the sheikh, someone that she can ask to release her from that marriage, who's, looking at the case the way that a responsible party should. But the right of divorce, to enact it in the moment, is given to the man for that reason. But again, it's a very weighty decision. So it's not something that we should look at as, oh, it's privileged and we don't have it. It's a huge amana and a huge responsibility. And there's so much riding on it that in a way, I feel anyway, as a woman, that it's a protection for us, alhamdulillah, because I think we would have a lot more divorces if women were able to enact it, because we're communicative, we're verbal, we're reactive verbally. So anyway, there's wisdom in everything, alhamdulillah.
Feel like there's so many different questions coming in, and all of them have nuanced portions and need so much time. But I want to take some time for those who got up the courage to send some of these questions in anonymously, which means that it's been really weighing heavily on their hearts. So one of the questions is question on abandonment and separation. I have seen the guidance on what to do if the husband separates and leaves. I have been praying for guidance and patience. It has been more than 3 months, and I find myself the only one trying to reconcile due to the severity of such a decision and the impact on our child and the future. There are mental health issues and substances use behind the abandonment. How will I know divorce is the right decision?
Yeah, this is where I think trying to make such a huge decision that impacts so many lives, your own, your child, everything else on your own, is where you're going to feel really overwhelmed. But having objective, qualified experts that you can lay it all out to, and asking them for their assessment, for their opinion and their advice, I think will help to solidify your own resolve. And of course, continuous istikhara. We have to continuously ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to give up. It's not a one-time thing. Sometimes people think, oh, I made istikhara, but no. As long as you're in the thick of these things and you're really, again, just not sure what to do, continuously turning to Allah every single day, please guide me, please help me. And then seeking out the professionals, the experts who you can entrust with your circumstance and say, what do you advise? And maybe you'll find that they either have a whole other recourse that you never thought of, or an option that you never even entertained. So that's the wisdom of seeking counsel. So I would definitely say to not try to make a decision this weighty on your own.
Ustadh Hosai, I know we are closing in on time, but two more interconnected questions, also private. Question on divorce. Is it truly okay to divorce when there is no intimacy for years or months? And on the flip side, for the person experiencing impotency and they cannot fulfill their partner's needs, do they need to divorce their partner?
Yeah, this is a very difficult situation. Again, I just want to be clear. These are sometimes very nuanced situations that require, like a fatwa or a sheikh to really, sheikha to be able to properly give, some answer. But just generally speaking, intimacy is a right. It's a marital right. And if that's one of the reasons why many people marry, because they need protection from the fitna of not being married. And especially in this overly sexualized world that we live in, it can be very difficult to try to even have any semblance of celibacy or just, being protected without an outlet. So I think we need to make sure that our marriages that's a healthy part of our marriage. Now, if there's a medical issue, if there's some reason why a partner cannot fulfill that right, then I think that's where the couple really needs to have a very serious conversation with each other, and each person has to determine whether or not it is something that they can live without. If the love or the bond or the children or whatever else is holding the relationship together, in spite of that, is it enough? Or if it's really a pressing desire and need that the person has, which they have the right to exercise, that they just can't live without. And that's a very subjective and deep personal conversation I think that couple has to have. And they can certainly have it with a mediator or a professional to really, again, weigh all their options so that they're not rushing into a decision. But to just shut it down, or to expect one partner to be like just okay with it and to make that sacrifice, and then to shame them as though they're being, overly, that their desires are so great and they're being this or that or the other, is not right. Because the sexual part of the relationship is a significant part of marriage for most, I would say most couples. And so, again, they'd have to really talk it through. And I would definitely say consider having a mediator or a professional part of that conversation as well, so that they can present to you alternatives and options, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan. And then one more question. There's so many that flooded in through the chat, but I want to be mindful of the topic as well, right? So the topic was, should we consider divorce? Because going beyond that, in terms of if people are experiencing specific things that definitely needs professional assistance, right? But this is one such scenario. What if the man is abusive behind closed doors and runs an Islamic organization as a figure of the public? How does a woman safely divorce him, and what scholars can be involved?
Right. Unfortunately, we know that there are cases of spiritual abuse that happen in the community, and nobody is above these things. I think that's a real something we have to be clear about, that we shouldn't believe for a moment that there are people that are above the ability to fall short and to make mistakes, even in their marriages, whether they are scholars or doctors or lawyers or whatever professional background or other background that they have. Everybody, we're all human beings. But I think, I would definitely advise the couple to seek out, legitimate scholars that are, known in the community, for advice and for guidance, and to proceed, according to Sharia, because, if you, there's just no other way. How else can you proceed, right? I mean, when you have, again, those types of situations are very delicate. There's a lot of things that you want to be mindful of, but entrusting an objective third party, someone who is known in the community, who's a leader, who's an elder, to be able to advise and to facilitate and to maybe even process or be part of the process of divorce. I think that that's the best way forward for that person, inshallah.
I know this must be tough for you because it's just so nuanced, all of it, and we can't give a blanket solution to everyone. It's all meant to be for each scenario, for each person and self-reflection involved. So we appreciate the time that you're taking for all of this. Jazakumullah khairan. Um,
Yeah, no,
and
just like,
yeah, an audience we recognize, Beloved Mercy, those tuning in, we recognize that this time is never enough to address all of the concerns that you have individually. So we are taking into account that this topic is important, and we're seeing your engagement. We're seeing how this is affecting you. And inshallah, we can work to bring you more lessons and teachings that revolve around topics like this that are affecting you personally. And inshallah, connecting you to the right resources so that you are able to navigate your hardships and find ease soon, inshallah. One final question while we're here. I know we're like way over time, Ustada, so please, 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 please bear with me, and thank you so much. Essentially, I wanted to ask one more question, which is, do you have any references for any Muslim-run legal organizations that can support women seeking low-cost or sliding scale U.S. legal divorces?
mashallah. Jazakallah khairan. There, here in the Bay Area, we have Sister Sana Subhani, who leads the Wasila Connections. I don't know if there are sister organizations, mashallah, there's just so many things that are always, our community's growing and there's a lot of services that are being added. But I think she would be a good starting point. The entire organization that she's created is to actually provide services to divorced couples and children out of divorced families. And it's just a wonderful initiative that she started. May Allah bless her. But I know that they have like legal advice. They have, mental health services. They have created, an entire organization on all of these things. Now, she may be a good person to ask for resources in your respective area. So I would contact her. If I can find the page, I'll post it here. But it's Wasila Connections. Let me see if I can get you the website.
Astada. And I believe this is important for everyone. Sharing of resources is important. If you're tuning into this video post after it's posted, if you have resources and links, definitely share them, but also with a grain of salt, right? None of us are experts in this area. Allah places different hardships in different people's lives, and we navigate them to the best of our abilities. And if there are not resources in your local community, then reach out through us, through other organizations, through your friends, to find resources outside of your local community if needed, right? It's never meant to be where you sit and suffer alone. That is not what the Ummah is about. The Ummah isn't about suffering alone. So definitely, inshallah, may someone come along your way so that they can help ease your path forward. If, again, you are considering divorce and even beyond.
I mean, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just going over the questions. I want to make sure we didn't miss any that were really important, because I know there's so much stigma and there's a lot of people who are afraid to ask certain questions. So I'm sure your team did a thorough review of all the questions coming in, but for my sake, don't worry about timing. If there's any question that's pressing and someone really needs help, you know, I can, maybe we can go another, 5 minutes or 10 minutes or so.
There might be a few more then. Give me a quick second.
Yeah, I just don't want to leave anybody feeling once again, you know.
Question on the marriage contract then. Let's talk about those who are approaching marriage, because now this is something that you do worry about, right? What if you don't get along with your spouse, or what if something happens after, right? So, Ustada, I have heard in the marriage contract, it's not often spoke about given women's emotional tendencies, but I've heard she can stipulate in her contract the right to free herself from the marriage at any time. Is this something helpful in narcissistic abusive relationships?
So I think, again, when you're drafting your nikah contract, you should do it with an expert, with someone who's well versed in Islamic law, so that you're doing it properly, exercising your rights, and it doesn't become this long list of demands that you want and these, you know, stipulations that you're putting in, because it's off-putting if you get a contract that has all these kind of ambiguous, you know, terms. I don't think people would feel safe, you know, if it's left like open-ended like that. So I would say the phrasing really matters, very specific language on what do you mean by free yourself? What is the condition? You know, those things have to be clear, because a person entering that bond, I think, would want to know what they're getting into. But if you just for whatever reason feel like, yeah, I'm out, you know, I'm tapping out, and I put it in my contract, that I can do that, I don't know if that's legally, first of all, sound or permissible. There are certain things, for example, marrying more than one. That is a very well established part of the marriage contract, that a woman has the right to say, if the husband chooses to marry another, we cannot prevent that, because by Sharia, they're permitted to marry more than one. But what we can stipulate in the contract is that it is legal grounds for divorce, that the woman has the right to exit that marriage. So something like that, which has already been vetted, already been determined as sound, is permissible, but kind of keeping it open and ambiguous or vague is where I think is dangerous. And we don't want to act from whim and desire. We want to act from taqwa. And that's where getting a scholarly person or someone who knows the fiqh to look over one's, you know, requests and conditions would be wise.
One more. If your husband is not fulfilling his role as the Imam of the house, is this sufficient reason for divorce? He pays the bills but does not nurture the kids or me as his wife. He uses his authority when it suits him without consistency. Please let me know what I should do.
Yeah, this is a case where I think, you know, it sounds like we need more context. You know, people are on different trajectories in their faith, and if a person is still Muslim and they're still, you know, practicing, I mean, they have faith, but maybe they're not fulfilling all of their duties. They're derelict in some of their spiritual responsibilities. This is where, you know, I mean, they say in this culture, like you're married through thick and thin, right? Through hardships and through challenges. So spiritual challenges are real. And sometimes people just kind of, you know, fall into this dip. So I think having a little bit of empathy may go a long way, instead of just looking down on your partner, you know, like, oh, they've gone astray. So, you know, what I mean by empathy is realizing maybe they're going through something that's causing them to not fulfill their religious obligations. And as a spouse, it would be good to, at least in good faith, try to address it. You know, maybe you can seek out if the local imam or someone in the family who's trusted, like a brother or sibling, could talk to them, could advise. But if they're really adamant, or, you know, just going through something, and then that's bleeding into the relationship and it's causing other problems, then I think you need to explore your options. But always, again, be a person who's trying to be empathic as the first line of action. If it's like, oh, they're not doing what I like, or they're not exactly what I expected, I'm out the door. That, I think, is the attitude that I'm trying to address. This desire to just kind of pull the plug on a marriage so quickly because it's convenient and you can. It's alien to our tradition. It's not from our faith. It's from this culture that has normalized just, recycling and getting through relationships really quickly. This is not our faith. Our faith is a faith that really sees marriage as a grounds for test and it grounds for spiritual growth and development. And sometimes it is your partner that when you're drowning, they're the life, they give you the lifeline that helps you out of it. So not to bail on someone just because they're going through some spiritual challenges, but rather try your best to advise, to give nasiha, to pray a lot for their guidance, to seek those advisors that could maybe help. And if you feel like it's just getting to the point where it's not tenable and it's becoming really difficult to stay married to that person, of course, then now you have options, but always do things with that degree of ihsan, of taqwa, of real desire to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before your own nafs. And inshallah, Allah will give you tawfiq.
I want to take a moment to kind of combine a couple of these questions that are, I think, with the same premise. What if you got married and then you find out that it was for a false reason? Right? So say for a green card, say for your money, say for some access to something that through you, right? It's not for you, to you, but for the things that you have access to. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, if there's fraud, that led to a marriage, that is grounds for divorce. But you also want to, once everything is out in the open and clear, this is where, again, seeking the counsel of your family, your spouse's family, the teachers in your community would be wise, because even if those, there was fraud, maybe there was some reason for that. And I'm not legitimizing fraud, but I think we have to empower people to make decisions that they're investing in their own future as well, and not just kind of quickly, again, knee-jerk reactions to things. People are complicated. People are, they make poor decisions based on fear, or maybe there was some other, context to why they felt the need to, hide something or distort something. Whatever the case is, you should just make informed decisions and put all of it out and decide and put your trust in Allah, because sometimes good can come from even those really complicated situations. People have overcome a lot of challenges just because they had the right niyyah and they trusted Allah and they did their due diligence. So I just feel like we need to really just turn to God with these types of complex situations, instead of giving people these snap answers and then, just causing havoc that they didn't foresee, because you're just giving into an emotional reaction, as opposed to saying, slow down. Okay, so they did this. Do you know the reason why they did this? Have you investigated? Can you maybe take this negative situation and make something positive come out of it in terms of, the future? Like, can you do all that? If it's not possible, it's not possible, but at least you did your due diligence to make an informed decision, and you did it with the proper, advisors and everybody, with transparency. And that's just, I feel, would be more wise. Allahu A'lam. Oh.
Okay, we are over time, but this question I believe is important, because this is an aspect that many think about, and it's something that I believe is critical to think about and consider, and we would love your advice. What is better for the children, to live with the toxic fighting parents or to peacefully separate?
Yeah, so this sort of, black or white scenario, to me, I have a problem with, because I don't think it's that simplistic. I think if we're, dealing with people who recognize that they are in a toxic marriage, then we have to, really be heavy-handed with those individuals, right? And this is where community responsibility and kind of like bringing the community together, the families, I mean, their involvement is important for that reason, to say it's not acceptable that these are the two options, that you either split and cause maybe certain problems for your children down the line because of a divorce, and then obviously the families are falling apart, or you just maintain status quo and continue your toxicity. Why are those the only two options? Why isn't there a third option that says, stop your insanity, work on yourself, get some help, figure things out? But it's not fair because you made your bed, right? Or you know, as they say, you what is it? You made your bed and you have to lie in it. But basically, when you make a commitment to marry, you have to follow through. You can't be this self-absorbed person that forgets that this is an amana, a contract with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to, you know, to be in this bond with this person. They have rights over you. You have rights over them. Your children have rights over you. So it's not acceptable, I think, to just say, well, you can maintain the toxicity or you can split. No. How about you do right by this child who didn't ask for their parents to be toxic? How about you fear God? How about you wake up from your ghafla and your narcissism or whatever else is going on, and you remember that there will be a day where you will stand before God? And I think if our families are a little bit more also, you know, willing to hold people's feet to the fire and not just, you know, play this whole, you know, I'll cover for you and I'll enable you and I'll just, because you're mine, you're my, you know, you're my son, you're my daughter, I'm just going to accept you with all of your faults. This is also not a good. This is not our deen. Our deen, you know, calls wrong out. Even against ourselves, we're supposed to be people that, you know, that will speak the truth. So if it's your family member who's abusive, who's toxic, who's causing a lot of problems, please hold them accountable and don't let them get away with obliterating and destroying a family just because they're too nafsi to work on their problems. But put it out there that no, it's expected of you, especially if you want our support, that you do your due diligence to try to work on yourself. We'll help you, we'll support you. But this attitude of like, oh, we'll just take you, you know, with all of your problems and allow you to continue to, you know, harm people and force them to stay married to you, or, you know, destroy a whole family unit. It's just, it's not, I just don't think those options are right. We have to do better.
Ustad Hosai, for your time, for your insight, for your du'as, and for your love for our community and the community that you are serving in your area. Please come to the East Coast, please. If we could end with a simple du'a for everyone who is joining, for everyone who will be joining after, so that they may self-reflect, inshallah, so that we all may self-reflect, inshallah.
Sure, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Ya Allah, we ask you for strength. Ya Allah, we ask you for guidance. Ya Allah, we ask you for protection against our own selves, for protection in our families, in our homes, for our children. We ask you for spouses that are God-fearing, that fear you, spouses that are aware that they will be held accountable for their actions. And we ask that we become spouses that fear you and that we are aware that we will be accountable for our actions. And we ask you for muwadda in our marriages, for love and rahmah and compassion, understanding, respect. We ask you for tongues that do not try to harm and inflict wounds on others, but rather tongues that practice restraint. We ask you for patience. We ask you for guidance. We ask you for suhbah that remind us to be the best versions of ourselves, not people that just inflate our egos and give us this feeling of entitlement and superiority, but rather remind us of accountability and that we must do our best and persevere despite the challenges. We ask you for family members who are not meddlesome, who do not intervene in our or intrude in our marriages and pry in our marriages and get involved, but respectfully maintain the boundaries. And we ask you for teachers to guide us, to help us, so that before we even marry, we are aware of our rights, and we are entering marriages fully aware that we have more rights to be considered, with more responsibilities to be considered, to be worried about, than rights to be entitled to. And we ask you for your continued forgiveness for our shortcomings and our wrong actions, and that you increase us in faith, and you increase us in patience, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and you put us in the footsteps of the best of creation, your beloved Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and help us to acquire beautiful character so that we become exemplars for one another and for our children and our future generation. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. May Allah protect all of you and your families and your marriages. And for those who are in difficult marriages, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala either provide for you an outlet to remove yourself from harm, or provide guidance for you and your spouse so that you can protect yourselves and shield yourselves from the attack of your nafs and shaitan. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustad Hosai. May you
Thank
have a blessed rest of the Friday, because you have a few more hours of daylight on the West Coast, and may you have a wonderful weekend, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you again. And please forgive me for I just want to say this for my own personal self. For anybody who was in the conversation and who felt that maybe certain things weren't touched upon, or I was maybe being very simplistic, that was not my intention. It's a very difficult topic to talk about. And I know there's a lot of individual cases that people may feel like, well, that's not, that doesn't apply, or that's not this, or that's not. This is a general topic. And the audience really was for those people who are being attacked by Iblis and their own nafs and encouraged to divorce prematurely. That's what this talk was for. If you're outside of that, please forgive anything that was said that didn't satisfy or suffice. And just pray for our community. There's a lot of pain. I can't tell you how many messages I get daily, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, about people who are really suffering in their marriages. And I see it as a spiritual war. We are in the midst of a spiritual war, and Iblis is severely attacking our community. So the talk was to really bolster people so that before they make any decision that could have devastating consequences, that they remember not to allow their nafs to be the one dictating, but rather to hold themselves accountable to God first and foremost. And if children are involved, to also remember that they are innocent, and sometimes our negligence or our own, self-absorption may cause harm, and to be mindful before we make decisions. That's all I was trying to convey. So if anybody has any further questions or anything, you can always contact me via my social media, and I'm happy to try to address those things maybe in future talks. But I thank you again, Noor, and the Celebrate Mercy team. May Allah bless all of you. Jazakumullah khairan. And forgive me for going on for so long. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.